I'm 72 years old and I'm tired of watching the destruction of what was once my family. As I sit in my chair by the window watching the fall rain pour down on Fairfield, I think the weather reflects my mood perfectly. Heavy gray clouds, a cold wind tearing the last leaves off the maples along the driveway. My name is Ramsey Pembroke. I've been a court stenographer most of my life. I stare at 28 months of fighting, chemotherapy, hospitals, hopes and disappointments. And all that time Alfred was there for her, supporting her while I was too busy managing my investments to spend as much time with my wife as I should have. It's one of my many sins that I now go over on sleepless nights. After Esther's death, a rift formed between my son and me. He never said it outright, but I knew he blamed me. And he's right. I had always been a demanding father, expecting my son to become what I myself had failed to become. When Alfred chose a career in cooking over law, I took it as a personal insult. Now he owns a small but successful restaurant in downtown Fairfield, and I've never been there once. The phone stops vibrating. A minute later, a text comes in. Dad, Sybil and I will stop by tomorrow. We need to discuss your move to the nursing home. Your house is too big for one. Love, Al. Nursing home, I grin. My Victorian mansion is indeed huge for one old man, but this is my home. The last thing that ties me to the past. 3 generations of Pembrokes have grown up here, and I know exactly what's behind this care. My house is valued at about $1,800,000. And then there's the savings, $650,000 in cash in a home safe. I've always preferred to keep a significant amount at home, not trusting banks after the crisis of 2008 year. Outside the window, I hear the sound of a car pulling up. A black BMW, Alfred's car, or rather Sybil's car, which Alfred had paid for. An unannounced visit. Well, I'm not surprised. I'm in no hurry to answer the door. Let them ring. Let them wait. My joints ache more than usual from the rain, and I rise slowly from the chair, leaning on my cane. It's mahogany with a silver handle in the shape of a wolf's head, a gift from my coworkers for my 60th birthday. She's 30. Alfred and I walk into the living room. He looks tired with dark circles under his eyes. The restaurant business has never been easy, and lately it doesn't look like things have been going brilliantly. I've heard from mutual friends that his place is going through a bad time because of the opening of a new shopping center on the outskirts of the city, which has drawn away customers. How's Autumn Garden? I ask, naming his restaurant. Alfred sighs and rubs the bridge of his nose in a gesture he inherited from me. It could be better. The rent has gone up 20%, and the customers are less and less. I'm thinking of moving to another location. I could help, I offer cautiously. No, thank you, he replies harshly. I'll do it myself. Pride. Another trait he's inherited from me, and it's getting in the way of both of us. We sit in awkward silence while Sybil rattles the dishes in the kitchen louder than necessary. Sybil spoke to a representative from Sun Harbor. Alfred begins, referring to one of the most expensive nursing homes in Fairfield. They have beds available, medical staff around the clock, 3 meals a day, social activities. I'm not going to a nursing home, Alfred, I interrupted him. I'm not out of my mind and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Dad, be reasonable. This house is too big. You stumble on the stairs, you forget to take your medicine. Who said I forget to take my medicine? I can feel the irritation building. Sybil? I saw untouched pill blisters in your bathroom last time I was here, Sybil says, entering with a tray. She sets it on the coffee table between us. 3 cups of coffee, a milkman, a sugar bowl. Everything's so neat, it's like we're in a restaurant, not my house. Have you been in my bathroom? I ask, even though I know the answer. Sybil has a habit of accidentally ending up in different parts of my house, especially where I keep papers. Haha. I was looking for aspirin. I had a migraine. She smiles that smile that should look sincere and apologetic, but looks calculating. I'm worried about you, Ramsey. I look at her with a long stare that made the people in the courtroom nervous and confused. Sybil endures it without blinking. I don't need babysitters, I say at last, and I'm not going to move anywhere. Dad, understand. We're worried. Alfred leans forward. What if you fall? What if you have a heart attack? You live alone, unsupervised. I have a panic button. I point to a small device on a cord around my neck, hidden under my shirt. And I'm not one of those old people who die alone and are found weeks later by smell. It's not just that, Sybil interjected, her voice softer, as if she were talking to a child. Ramsey, this house is part of your legacy. You have to think about the future, about how to preserve it for the family. This is it, the real reason for their visit. My will is in perfect order, I reply. The house will go to Alfred when I die, but I plan to live a long time, so you'll have to wait. I see Sybil and Alfred exchange quick glances. Something is going on between them, something I don't understand. Perhaps the problems with the restaurant are more serious than Alfred is willing to admit. No one expects you to die, Daddy, Alfred says with resentment in his voice. We just want you to be safe and looked after. And so you're suggesting I sell the house I've lived in all my life and move into a nursing home? I shake my head. No, thank you. Sybil sips her coffee, her face becoming thoughtful. What if we moved in with you? She suggests out of the blue. This house is big enough for all of us. We could keep an eye on you and you wouldn't have to move anywhere. I almost choke on my coffee in surprise. The suggestion takes me by surprise. Alfred looks as surprised as I am. Sybil, we haven't discussed it, he says, because you don't want to see the obvious solution. She puts her hand on his knee in a gesture that should look supportive, but is actually controlling. Your father doesn't want to leave. We're worried about him, and the restaurant is in crisis. If we move here, we can cut our rent on our apartment, be close to the Ramseys, and maybe put the money we save into saving Autumn Garden. I can see the idea beginning to appeal to Alfred. His eyes light up with that practical glint that comes when he sees a profitable solution. He gets that from his mother. Esther always knew how to compromise. That's not a bad idea, he says carefully, looking at me. What do you think, Dad? What do I think? I think it's the worst idea I've ever heard. I value my solitude, my space, and I don't trust Sybil at all, but to refuse now would be to alienate my son even further. I need to think about it, I answer evasively. It's a big decision. Of course, Sybil smiled as if she already knew the answer. We're not rushing you, but think of the benefits. The company, the care, the opportunity to spend more time with your family. Family, it's ironic. What we have now can hardly be called family. Alfred and I hardly ever have a real conversation. I don't know his life, his problems. He doesn't know my thoughts, my regrets. Between us are years of unspoken grievances, failed conversations, missed opportunities. All right, I'll think about it, I promise, knowing my answer will be no. Sybil looks pleased. She gets up and starts to collect the cups. I'll quickly wash the dishes and check what you have in the fridge. Are you eating well, Ramsey? She doesn't wait for an answer, heading for the kitchen. As soon as she's out of sight, I lean over to my son. Alfred, how bad is the restaurant really doing? He looks surprised by my candor, but then his shoulders slump. I'm on the verge of bankruptcy, Dad, he admits quietly. 3 more months of this kind of income, and I'll have to close. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I could have. Help? He interrupts bitterly. The usual, with conditions and advice. I told you the restaurant business was unreliable. If you had listened to me and gone to law school, no thanks. I prefer to solve my own problems on my own. His words hurt, but I can't say they're unfair. I was exactly the kind of father I was. Controlling, judgmental, stingy with praise. I blame my job, the need to be accurate and impartial. But the truth is, I just didn't know how to be different. My own father was the same way. Cold, demanding, never satisfied. I wasn't going to lecture you, I say more gently. I just wanted to help. Alfred looks at me in disbelief. I'm sorry, Dad, but I can't remember the last time you offered to help without conditions. We sit in silence, broken only by the sounds of water and dishes from the kitchen. I don't know what to say because he's right. I've always used money as a way of control, as leverage. It was wrong, but I knew no other way to keep my son close. Sybil returns from the kitchen, wiping her hands with a towel. Your fridge is practically empty, Ramsey, she said reproachfully. A few eggs, half a loaf of bread, and some stale cheese. How long has it been since you've had a proper meal? I order delivery, I reply, irritated by her intrusion, and sometimes I go to the cafe on the corner. That's not a healthy diet for someone your age, Sybil shakes her head. That's another reason why you need someone around you. I could cook for you every day. Alfred says I'm an excellent cook, though of course not on a professional level like him. She smiles at her husband with false modesty. I've never tasted her cooking, but I doubt she can do anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. Sybil, I wish I could fix it, but I don't know how. Perhaps it's too late. My thoughts return to Sybil. There's something wrong with that woman. From the first time I met her, I sensed it. The falsity behind the smile, the calculation behind the ostentatious care. At first, I put my dislike down to jealousy, the natural reaction of a father who loses his son. But as time went on, my suspicions only grew stronger. Sybil came into Alfred's life at a difficult moment, 6 months after Esther's death. He was vulnerable, lonely, heartbroken, the perfect target for a woman looking for a wealthy husband. Alfred isn't rich, but he has a stable business, and more importantly, the prospect of inheriting my fortune. I remember how quickly their relationship developed. 3 months into their acquaintance, they announced their engagement, and 2 months later they were married. A small ceremony, just a few guests. I was against such a rush, but Alfred didn't listen. It was like he was clinging to Sybil like a lifeline in a sea of grief. And now she wants to move into my house, get access to my things, my papers, my safe. And Alfred, blinded by his financial problems and her manipulations, is prepared to agree. No, this can't end well. I have to protect myself and possibly save my son from this woman. But how? Alfred won't believe a bad word about Sybil. She has surrounded him in a cocoon of lies and manipulation, isolated him from his friends, convinced him that she is the only one who truly cares for him. I need proof, something irrefutable that will open Alfred's eyes. I rise slowly and walk to the phone. There is one person who can help, Mansfield Crosby, my old friend and former court technician. If anyone can install hidden cameras discreetly, it's him. I'll call him tomorrow. In the meantime, I need to figure out how to proceed. One thing is certain, I will not let Sybil destroy what little is left of my family and take over what I have saved up all my life. Mansfield Crosby arrived the day after my call. Despite his 78 years, he retained a remarkable vivacity of mind and firmness of hand. We had met 40 years ago when he installed the first audio recording system in our courthouse and had maintained a relationship ever since. After by noon the next day, everything was installed. 3 cameras in the office and 2 in the bedroom, plus motion sensors. Mansfield showed me how to use an app on my tablet to view the footage and get notifications. Thanks, Mance, I said as I walked him to the exit. I owe you a debt of gratitude. Just be careful, Ramsey, he said seriously. If that woman is really up to something bad, she could be dangerous. Call me anytime if you need help. After he left, I felt strangely relieved. I now had eyes where none had been before. If Sybil was up to something, I would know about it. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Sybil arrived unannounced, saying she just wanted to see how I was doing. But I noticed her eyes lingering on my office door, her unobtrusive inquiries about my daily life. Do you still pay your own bills, Ramsey? She asked, stirring the soup. Must be tedious, keeping up with all those papers and bank statements. I manage, I answered briefly. I've always had a good memory for numbers. Yes, Alfred said. She turned to me with a smile. But still, when we move, I could help with that. Organize all the paperwork, set up automatic payments. It's all done online now. I prefer the traditional methods, I said. Paper checks, cash payments, old school. Sure, she nodded. But still, if you ever need help. By the way, where do you keep all these documents? Probably in that big safe in your office? That's it. Direct question. I felt my heart beat faster, but I kept my expression calm. Not only that, I answered evasively, I have different places for different papers. After lunch, Sybil said she had a phone call to make and went out into the garden for a few minutes. I took the moment to check an app on my tablet. The cameras recorded how half an hour earlier, while I was reading the newspaper in the living room, Sybil had quickly slipped into my office. The video showed her looking around the room, walking over to the safe, examining it, then opening several desk drawers, taking a quick look at the contents. My suspicions were confirmed. She was looking for information about my finances, about the safe. But why? What exactly was she planning? When Sybil returned, I pretended not to know anything. We talked some more about nothing, and then she left, promising to drop by in a couple of days. For the next few days, I kept a close eye on the camera footage. Sybil came twice more, each time finding an excuse to drop by my office. Once she even brought some papers, supposedly from Alfred, to be signed an insurance policy or something. While I was reading the papers, she unobtrusively asked about my office. "What a cozy place," she said, running her hand over the spines of the books on the shelf. "Do you work here, or is it more of a place to store important papers?" "Both," I answered. "I like to keep everything important close at hand." That makes sense," she nodded and then added casually. "Does that old safe still work? It looks so antique." "It works fine," I said, watching her closely. "I regularly check the mechanism and change the code." "The code?" Her eyes flashed with interest for a moment, but she quickly hid it. "Oh, so it's not a key lock? How interesting. And it's hard to memorize the combination?" "Sorta, not particularly if you know the system." I was being deliberately vague. "Important dates, numbers that matter to me." I could see her mentally making a note, probably planning to try birth dates, anniversaries. But my safe's code was a completely random set of numbers, unrelated to any personal dates. A week after the cameras were installed, I noticed something even more disturbing. While I was at the bank, the cameras captured Sybil entering my house using a key I had never given her. She went straight to the study and spent almost an hour there, methodically searching every drawer, every shelf, taking pictures of documents on her phone. Then she went to the safe and started dialing different combinations. I could see her frustration after several failed attempts. At one point, she pulled out her phone and called someone, talking quietly, but the camera still caught part of the conversation. "It's not working?" "No, I've tried all the obvious combinations. Need more time?" This incident finally convinced me. Sybil was not just a curious or caring daughter-in-law. She was deliberately seeking access to my finances, to my safe. And judging from the phone call, she wasn't acting alone. I decided to talk to Alfred. I picked a moment when we could meet alone, without Sybil. I invited him to lunch at a little restaurant we both loved. "Dad, is something wrong?" Alfred asked as we sat down at the table. "You look worried." "Son, I need to have a serious talk with you," I began. "It's about Sybil." I saw his face immediately tense up. "What about Sybil? Do you know her well? I mean, her past, her family?" Alfred frowned. "Of course I know her. We've been married 4 years. Why the questions?" "I've noticed something strange," I said cautiously. "She's often at my house when you're not there, and she takes an unusual interest in my financial records, in the safe." Alfred looked at me with growing irritation. "Dad, Sybil cares about you. She wants to help with organizing the papers, with paying the bills. That's caring, not odd behavior." "Son, listen." "No, you listen to me," he interrupted sharply. "I know what's going on. You've never accepted Sybil. You looked down on her from the start, thought she wasn't worthy of being part of the Pembroke family, and now that she's trying to get on with you, you're making up suspicions." "Alfred, that's not true." "Yes, it is." His voice rose, attracting the attention of the neighboring tables. "It's what you've always done, Dad. Controlling, judgmental, never trusting my choices. First my profession, now my wife. Nothing suits the great Ramsay Pembroke." I was amazed at the force of his emotion. Was I really such a father? So controlling, so distrustful. "I'm just worried about you," I said quietly. "No, you worry about your money, your house, your legacy." Alfred grinned bitterly. "Always about material things, never about feelings, about people." He stood up, tossing his napkin on the table. "I thought you'd changed, Dad. When you suggested we move, I thought you were finally ready to accept my life as it is. But I was wrong. You're still the same." "Alfred, wait." But he was on his way out, leaving me alone at the table. I could feel the curious stares of the other customers, but I was more concerned with what I saw in my son's eyes, not just anger, but deep, lingering disappointment. Back home, I spent a sleepless night analyzing our conversation, remembering Alfred's reaction. He had trusted Sybil completely, was sure of her sincerity. Or was it just an appearance? Maybe he suspected something too, but didn't want to admit it, even to himself. The next morning, I checked the cameras and discovered that during the night, while I was at the restaurant with Alfred, someone had been in my office again. Not Sybil this time, but a man in dark clothes and gloves. His face didn't come into the picture, but he was larger in build than Alfred. He scrutinized the safe, even running some sort of scanner-like device over it. Then he methodically searched the desk drawers, photographed a few documents, and left. This was no longer just suspicious, it was dangerous. Who was this man? Sybil's accomplice? And how had he gotten into the house? I telephoned Mansfield and told him the latest developments. "Ramsey, this is serious," he said worriedly. "You must go to the police. Summon them and be very, very careful." A day later, Sybil called to say that she and Alfred wanted to discuss the details of the move. I agreed to the meeting, determined to play the part of the unsuspecting old man. They arrived in the evening. Sybil was sweet and caring as always. Alfred was a little aloof, but tried to be polite. Apparently, he had decided not to mention our last conversation. I saw her smile falter for a split second. "But the east wing is closer to your bedroom. If you need help at night—" "I do just fine on my own," I interrupted. "And I prefer my privacy at night." Alfred looked puzzled. "Dad, we can live in any part of the house, as long as you're comfortable." "I'll be comfortable if you live in the west wing," I said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Sybil changed her tactics. "Of course, Ramsey, as you say," she smiled her fake smile. "We want you to be comfortable. After all, this is your home." After they left, I couldn't calm down for a long time. Something was definitely going on, something not good. Sybil was manipulating the situation, manipulating Alfred, trying to manipulate me. But why? What exactly was she planning? My attempts to talk to my son had hit a blind wall. Alfred trusted his wife completely, saw her only as caring and loving, and he thought of me as a suspicious old man who couldn't accept the presence of another woman in the family after Esther's death. Maybe he was right. Maybe my age and loneliness had made me paranoid. I almost began to doubt my suspicions, almost convinced myself that I was exaggerating. And then I checked the camera footage again and saw Sybil, thinking she was alone, saying on the phone in my office, "He doesn't even suspect. The old man thinks he's in control, but that's about to change. I've almost figured out the code to the safe. We need to act fast right after we move in." No, I wasn't paranoid. The danger was real, and it was getting closer. It had been 3 days since I'd seen the tape of Sybil in my office. 3 endless days filled with anxiety and tension. I didn't know exactly when she planned to act, but I was sure it would be soon. Alfred called to let me know that he and Sybil had moved up their moving date. They were now planning to move in with me in a week instead of 3 days. "We've had some problems with packing," he explained. So that I could hear Sybil coming up the stairs, slowly, carefully, avoiding the creaky steps. She had obviously studied the house well over her visits. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed she must hear it through the closed door. She peered into my bedroom first. I lay motionless with my mouth slightly ajar, mimicking an elderly man's deep sleep. Through barely open eyelids, I could see her silhouette in the doorway. She stood there for about 30 seconds watching me, then quietly closed the door and moved down the hall toward my office. When the sound of her footsteps faded, I carefully pulled out my phone and switched to the cameras in my office. Sybil was already there, heading straight for the safe. She was wearing dark clothes, her hair gathered into a tight bun, and thin latex gloves on her hands. No random footprints, no fingerprints. This is clearly not a spontaneous decision, but a carefully planned action. I saw her pull a small piece of paper from her pocket, probably the code to the safe. How did she recognize it? Had she peeked at it while I was opening the safe? Or was it the result of the many attempts she had made in my absence? It didn't matter, though. Sybil dialed the combination. A second of tension, and the safe door opened. I saw a slight smile on her face as she looked inside and saw the neatly folded stacks of bills. $650,000. All of my savings. Or rather, that's what Sybil must have thought. In fact, I had long ago moved the real money into a safe deposit box, leaving just enough in the safe to give the impression of the full amount. She began methodically moving the money into the small gym bag she had brought with her. She did it carefully without unnecessary haste, as if she had the whole world at her disposal. I was struck by her coolness and methodicalness. She really was a professional, or at least experienced in such matters. Finished with the money, Sybil took out her cell phone and dialed a number. She spoke very quietly, almost in a whisper, but the camera's sensitive microphone picked up every word. I'm in. Everything went smoothly. She paused, listening for an answer. Yeah, full payment. The old man sleeps like a dead man. No, Alfred doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm at Jenny's. Of course not. He won't even realize what's happened until it's too late. She listens again, then laughs softly. Don't worry, darling. In a week, we'll move in here, and everything will be under control. And in a month, 2 at the most, we'll have the house and everything else. I know what I'm doing. This isn't my first old friend, remember? It's like I've been splashed with ice water. Not your first old friend. What did that mean? How many others like me had been hurt by her actions? And what exactly did she mean by, we'll have a house and everything in a month? Was she really planning to... I was interrupted by her voice. I'll be right there. Wait for me at the same place where we agreed. She ended the call, looked around the office one more time, checking for any traces, then closed the safe and headed for the exit. I quickly switched to the camera in the hallway, watching her walk past my bedroom. For a moment, she stopped at my door again, listening. I lay still, continuing to simulate a deep sleep. Satisfied with the silence, she moved on. After a moment, I heard the front door close quietly. She was gone. I waited until the noise of her car faded into the distance, then stood up and walked to the window. It was a moonless night and the street was drowning in darkness. Somewhere out there, in that darkness, Sybil was on her way to her accomplice. The man she called sweetheart. Her lover? Partner in crime? Probably both. I walked back to the bed and sat down, mulling over what I'd heard. The situation was worse than I'd realized. Sybil didn't just want to steal my money. She had a larger plan involving my house and perhaps something even more sinister. And Alfred, my son, was just a pawn in her game, a tool to gain access to my fortune. My first impulse was to call the police immediately. I had a record of the crime. I had proof. But what would that do? Arrest Sybil? Perhaps, but also Alfred's shattered life, his shattered faith in people, in love, in his own ability to judge characters. My son was just beginning to recover from his mother's death, and a blow like this could have broken him completely. No, the police could wait. I had to think things through first, find a way to protect both myself and Alfred, to minimize the damage. A strategic approach was what was required. I pulled out my laptop and saved the camera footage in several places, on my hard drive, in cloud storage, on a flash drive, which I then hid in a hiding place behind the fake socket in the bathroom. If Sybil or her accomplice tried to get rid of the evidence, I'd still have copies. If I call the police now, she could get off with a suspended sentence for theft and then start all over again with a new victim. Mansfield paused for a moment, then sighed. I understand your logic, but it's risky. If she realizes you know, she won't realize, I assured him. I'll be careful. Just increase the surveillance on the house, and if you can, install additional cameras outside. I want to see who comes and goes. After my conversation with Mansfield, I sat in the dark for a long time, pondering the situation. If Sybil really did have experience with the elderly, as she had hinted in the phone conversation, then perhaps she had a definite scheme of action. First to rub in their trust, then to gradually gain control of their finances, and then... The thought was too disturbing to complete. But I had to consider all possibilities, even the darkest ones. By morning, I decided to continue playing the part of the unsuspecting old man. Let Sybil think her plan was working perfectly. In the meantime, I would gather information, find out details, prepare for the moment when I could reveal the whole truth and protect myself and Alfred. Toward noon, Alfred called. Morning, Dad. How are you feeling today? Not bad for my age, I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. How are you doing? I'm good. Listen, Sybil and I were thinking that maybe we should move earlier in the week, maybe even this weekend. Sybil's worried about you, says you looked tired the last time we saw you. That's it. After stealing the money, Sybil decided to speed things up. I wonder why. Was she afraid I'd find it missing? Sounds great, I said, adding a note of enthusiasm to my voice. I'd love the company. It's getting a little lonely in this big house, isn't it? Alfred seemed surprised by my willingness. Good. I'll tell Sybil. She'll be happy. After the conversation, I tried to imagine what was going on now between Sybil and Alfred. Had she told him about the money? I don't think so. Judging from the telephone conversation I had overheard, Alfred was in the dark as to her actions. She lied to him, saying she'd spent the evening with a friend. So she either hid the money or she gave it to an accomplice. What about this accomplice? Who is he? Apparently they were romantically involved. A lover she planned to run off with after she got what she wanted from me and Alfred? Or a longer-term partner she'd worked with more than once? I decided to talk to Lucius Vale, a former police detective with whom we'd often worked in court. If anyone could help me make sense of this situation, it was him. We met at the same cafe as last time. Lucius looked worried when I described to him what had happened the night before. Ramsey, this is serious, he said when I finished. If she stole the money and is planning something else, you're in danger. I know, I nodded, but I want to know who I'm dealing with. You said she's been changing her name. What else have you been able to find out about her past? Lucius pulled out a small notebook. I kept digging after we talked. Serena Weiner, aka Sybil Winthrop, has an interesting history. Like I said, the second almost got carbon monoxide poisoning due to a malfunctioning furnace at the country house. The third was killed in a car accident, brake failure on a mountain road. I felt a chill run down my spine. You think they... I'm not claiming anything. Lucius held up his hand. Officially, all of these cases have been ruled accidental, but the statistics are alarming. One more thing. After the third husband died, both Serena and Caleb disappeared, changed their names, changed their looks, moved. Next thing we know, Sybil Winthrop shows up here and soon marries your son. And Caleb, I'm not sure where he is or under what name, but if the pattern remains the same, he's somewhere in the neighborhood. I showed Lucius the camera footage that showed the vague silhouette of a man entering my office a few days ago. Do you think it could have been him? Lucius scrutinized the tape. It could be. The build is similar to what I've seen in Caleb's photos, but the quality isn't good enough to be sure. So I have reason to believe that Sybil and her cousin are planning something serious, I said thoughtfully. Perhaps even an attempt on my life. I'm afraid so, Lucius was serious. And unless their scheme has changed, Alfred will be next after you die. He will inherit the house and the remaining assets, and then he too will have an accident. The thought horrified me. It was one thing to worry about your own safety, and quite another to realize that your only son could be in mortal danger. What should I do, Lucius? I asked, feeling fear gripping my heart. Go to the police. With what we have now, they could arrest her for theft, he replied. But I'm not sure that's enough to link her to past accidents or prove intent to harm you or Alfred. We need more than that. How much time do I have? It's hard to say. Based on previous cases, she acted quickly after gaining control of the finances. Weeks, maybe a month. But now that she's accelerating the move, I'd say be very careful. On the way home, I reflected on our conversation. The situation was worse than I had realized. Not just a theft, but possibly a murder plot. And not just me, but Alfred as well. My son, for all our differences, didn't deserve this fate. I had to protect him, even if he didn't believe he needed protection. At home, I audited the safe so I knew exactly what Sybil had stolen. As I suspected, she had taken all the money that was in there, about $120,000. The rest, fortunately, was in a safe place. She also took a few documents, copies of my will, the title to the house, and other assets. Nothing that would give her legal authority over my finances, but enough to understand the big picture of my fortune. In the evening tomorrow, I would gather evidence, figure out the details of their scheme, prepare for the moment when I could expose them once and for all. In the meantime, I'll wait, observe, document, like I've done all my professional life, documenting other people's crimes and lies. Only this time, the stakes were higher than ever before, my life and my son's. I checked the cameras one more time, made sure everything was working properly. Then I pulled an old revolver I kept for self-defense out of my desk drawer, checked that it was loaded, and put it in the drawer of my bedside table. I hoped I wouldn't need it, but it was better to be prepared for anything. I hardly slept that night, listening to every rustle, every creak of the old house. But Sybil didn't come back. Perhaps she was sure she had successfully completed her part of the plan and could now afford to wait for the next stage. Moving in, gaining full access to my home, my life, my death. But I was waiting too, and unlike her, I knew exactly who I was dealing with. It gave me an advantage, small, but real, and I was going to make the most of it. I met the morning after the theft with a clear head and a firm resolve. Despite the sleepless night, I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in a long time. Perhaps nothing invigorates an old man like the prospect of defending himself and his child from a predator. The first thing I did was call Hubert Kravitz, my longtime friend and lawyer. We had met in law school, though our paths diverged when I chose a career as a court stenographer and he became a successful civil litigation attorney. Despite our different professional trajectories, we have maintained our friendship for nearly 50 years. Hubert, I need your help, I said as soon as he answered. It's about my will, and a few other things. It sounds serious, Ramsey. I could hear the concern in his voice. What is it? Not on the phone. Can you come over today? Sure, I'll be at your place by 2 o'clock. Hubert, this is a serious offense. You must go to the police. I will, I assured him. But first I want to be sure that my family is protected and that I have enough evidence to stop Sybil and her accomplice for good, not just for a while. Hubert nodded, understanding my logic. What do you want to do with the will? Change it, I said firmly. Sybil obviously expects Alfred to inherit everything after I die, and then she will somehow gain control of the assets. I want to destroy that plan. We spent the next 2 hours carefully reviewing my will. According to the previous version, Alfred was the sole heir to all my assets. My house, my investments, my savings. Now we had a new version. The bulk of my fortune would go into a trust managed by Hubert, with the stipulation that Alfred would receive a monthly income, but could not dispose of the principal without the approval of the Board of Trustees. It would protect him from impulsive decisions and from Sybil's influence, Hubert explained as he completed the paperwork. Hell, even if she remains his wife, she won't have access to the capital stock. And if something happens to me in the near future? I asked bluntly. Hubert nodded understandingly. I added a special clause. If your death occurs under suspicious circumstances, a thorough investigation must be conducted and the asset distribution is suspended until it is completed. I've also included all the information you've given me about Sybil in a sealed envelope that will only be opened in the event of your death. Great. I felt a little relieved. At least Sybil wouldn't be able to get my fortune easily, even if her plan to eliminate me worked. But protecting my assets was only the first step. I needed to gather more evidence against Sybil and her accomplice, find a connection to their previous crimes, and most importantly, convince Alfred of his wife's true nature. After Hubert left, I contacted Lucius Vale and asked him to find any information he could about Sybil's past victims and the circumstances of their deaths or financial losses. Shudders. I'll talk to my colleagues in the police departments of the cities where she used to live, Lucius promised. Maybe some of the detectives still remembered the cases. If there were any suspicions, I'll find them. The next item in my plan was to make a complete copy of all the evidence I had, videotapes, information about Sybil's past, the new will, and store it in several secure locations. I recorded everything on several flash drives and hid them in different parts of the house, in hiding places no one knew about. I gave one to Hubert for safekeeping, one to Mansfield. If anything happens to me, I said to Mansfield, handing him the flash drive, give this to Lucius. He'll know what to do. I also made changes to the house's security system. Mansfield had installed additional cameras pointed at all the entrances and windows, as well as motion sensors in the hallways and stairs. I was now notified of any movement in the house at night. It won't stop a determined intruder, Mansfield warned, but at least you'll know if someone tries to break into the house. I realized that all these measures were only preparatory. The real plan of retaliation required something more dramatic, something that would not only stop Sybil, but open Alfred's eyes to her true nature. And to do that, I needed to pretend I didn't suspect anything, to give her a false sense of security, to let her continue her game until I had gathered all the evidence I needed. So when Alfred and Sybil arrived with the first shipment of things for the move, I greeted them with a smile and open arms. How glad I am that you have finally decided to move, I said as I hugged my son. This house is too big for one old man. Sybil looked a little tense, watching me with slight wariness. Was she looking for signs that I had discovered the missing money? Or was she simply worried about the next stage of her plan? We're very glad too, Ramsay, she said with that fake smile I had learned to recognize. Alfred had already begun to pack the kitchen utensils. He is so excited at the prospect of cooking in your spacious kitchen. Don't exaggerate, Sib, Alfred smiled embarrassedly. But yes, I'm really looking forward to trying out your oven, Dad. It's much bigger than what I'm used to. We spent the next few hours moving boxes and discussing the arrangement of furniture in the west wing of the house. I noticed Sybil trying several times to steer the conversation toward my study and the safe, but I skillfully avoided those topics. By the way, Ramsay, she said as Alfred went out to fetch another box from the car, have you noticed anything strange lately? In the house, I mean? Strange? I pretended to wonder. No, nothing in particular. Why? I was just asking, she shrugged with feigned nonchalance. Old houses often have their own character. Creaks, strange noises at night. Oh, that, I grinned. Yes, the house sometimes talks to me, especially in rainy weather. But I'm so used to it that I don't notice it anymore. She nodded, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was checking to see if I'd heard her nocturnal intrusion, if I'd noticed anything suspicious. When Alfred returned, the conversation turned to more neutral topics, but I continued to watch Sybil. But I knew at once that she was going to meet her accomplice, perhaps to discuss future plans or to hand over the stolen money. Speaking of plans, I said as they were about to leave, I was thinking of throwing a little dinner to celebrate your move. Invite a few old friends, celebrate the new stage in our family life. What do you say? Sounds wonderful, Dad. Alfred was obviously pleased with my enthusiasm. Right, Sib? Of course, she smiled, though I noticed a shadow of worry in her eyes. When are you thinking of having this dinner? Next Friday, perhaps. You should be fully settled in by then. Sybil and Alfred looked at each other, and I saw her nod faintly. Friday will be fine, Alfred said. So who do you want to invite? Only my closest friends, I answered carelessly. Hubert, of course. Lucius and Mansfield, maybe. They've all wanted to meet you for so long, Sybil. I noticed her tense at the mention of Lucius's name. Perhaps she knew of his past with the police? Or was she simply wary at the prospect of meeting my friends, who might not have been as easily fooled as I was? After they left, I immediately contacted Lucius and told him about Sybil's planned trip. We need to find out exactly where she's going and who she's meeting with, I said. It could be the key to unlocking the whole scheme. I'll look into it, Lucius promised. I have a couple of private investigators I know who could follow her. If she meets with her alleged accomplice, we'll know who he is and what they're planning. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. Alfred and Sybil came several times, bringing more and more things. Sybil kept a little aloof, as if her thoughts were somewhere far away. I noticed that she checked her phone often, sometimes going into another room to answer messages or calls. Finally, the day of her trip to her friend's house arrived. Lucius had warned me that his man would be watching her from the moment she left town. That evening, he called me. Ramsay, we've got her. She met a man at a motel on the outskirts of Pinewood. Description looks like Caleb Stillman, although his appearance is slightly altered. They spent about 2 hours together, then she left. Did you manage to overhear anything? I asked hopefully. No, Sheridan, my man's still tailing this Caleb guy. We'll see where he goes and what he does. With any luck, we'll be able to establish his current identity and where he lives. I thanked Lucius and thought about it. So Sybil really wasn't working alone. And judging by their meeting, there was a romantic relationship between them. She was deceiving not only me, but Alfred as well, using him as a cover for her true intentions. She had brought back some souvenirs, supposedly from her friend, and talked about what a wonderful time they'd had, reminiscing about the good old days. I watched her, marveling at her ability to lie so easily and convincingly. Even knowing the truth, I could almost believe her stories, so natural she seemed. No wonder Alfred and her other victims fell for it. The day after Sybil's return, I noticed something interesting. She was wearing a new diamond bracelet on her wrist, which had obviously cost a lot of money. What a beautiful piece of jewelry, I remarked casually as we dined with Alfred. Is it new? Oh, it's... She faltered a little, then smiled. Yes, I bought it yesterday. A little gift to myself. Life's too short to deny yourself small pleasures, isn't it? Of course, I nodded, watching Alfred's reaction. He looked a little surprised. I didn't know you were planning to buy jewelry, Sib. We were talking about saving money because of the restaurant situation. It was a spontaneous decision, darling. She put her hand on his shoulder. And I used my personal savings. Don't worry. Alfred nodded, but I could see he wasn't completely convinced. The first crack in her carefully constructed facade? In the days that followed, I noticed several more signs that Sybil had begun spending the stolen money. An expensive designer handbag, a new phone of the latest model, ordering expensive furniture for their rooms in my house. Every time Alfred expressed surprise or concern, she found some explanation. A sale, a gift from a friend, using old savings. But I could see that Alfred was beginning to notice inconsistencies. Not that he suspected anything criminal, but he definitely sensed that something was wrong. Son, Papa, he asked me one day when we were alone together, have you noticed anything strange in Sybil's behavior lately? I decided to be careful. Strange? In what way? I don't know, he looked confused. She's been spending more, going off on her own errands more often. Sometimes I call her and she doesn't pick up for hours. She says she didn't hear the call, or the phone's dead. And this trip to her friend's house. She'd never mentioned this Jenny before. I felt a prick of sympathy. Alfred was starting to see the signs, but he was interpreting them wrong. He probably suspected ordinary infidelity without realizing the true extent of Sybil's betrayal. I'm sure there's an explanation for everything, I said in a neutral tone. Perhaps the move had caused her stress, and she was trying to compensate with small pleasures. Alfred nodded, but I could see he wasn't entirely convinced. You're probably right. It's just, I feel like she's hiding something from me, and it's bothering me. Talk to her, I suggested. Open communication is the key to any relationship. It was hard for me to give such advice, knowing that talking to Sybil would only lead to more lies and manipulation. But I wasn't ready to reveal the whole truth just yet. It wasn't time yet. Meanwhile, my plan for retribution was taking more and more concrete shape. Lucius reported that his man had established Caleb Stillman's current identity. He was now living under the name Christopher Shepard and working as an investment consultant in a neighboring town. The perfect cover for a man planning financial fraud. One more thing, Lucius added. I spoke to the detective who investigated the death of Sybil's third husband. He's still convinced it wasn't an accident. The brakes on the car were obviously damaged intentionally, but they've never been able to prove it. And guess who was the last person to see the car before the accident? Caleb? That's right. He was supposedly helping his son-in-law check out the car before a long drive. 2 hours later, he crashed on a mountain road. This information only served to strengthen my resolve. Sybil and her accomplice weren't just thieves. They were capable of murder. And if I understood their scheme correctly, I was to be their next victim. It was 3 days before the scheduled dinner when Sybil made her next move. She came into my study, where I was working on old photo albums, ostensibly to fetch tea. Ramsey, she began, placing the cup on the table. I'm worried about your health. You work so much with these papers. At your age, it can be exhausting. I'm fine, Sybil, I replied calmly. I've always loved archival work. Yes, but still... She sat down on the edge of the chair opposite. I thought maybe I could help you organize the documents. Make digital copies, organize everything. That's very thoughtful of you, I smiled, but I prefer the old-fashioned approach. Paper, folders, handwritten notes. Of course, she nodded, but I could see she wasn't satisfied. What about your bills? Your payments? Alfred mentioned that you still went to the bank to pay your bills yourself. Habit, I shrugged. And I like the walk to the bank. Keeps me in shape. Sybil looked a little disappointed, but she didn't give up. I understand, but perhaps you could show me how you organize your financial records, just in case you ever need help? I pretended to mull over her suggestion, then nodded. Why not? I think it's reasonable, but not tonight, if you don't mind. I'm a little tired. Of course, she instantly feigned concern. Get some rest. Perhaps tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? Sakanair. After dinner, I suggested. When all our guests had left and we could talk about it in peace, she agreed, though I could see she didn't like the delay. She wanted access to my financial records as soon as possible. Why? To plan her next move? Or was she already preparing for an accident and wanted to make sure she could quickly gain control of my assets after my death? Either way, I wasn't about to give her that opportunity. My plan was almost ready. Hubert had finalized all the legal preparations, Lucius had gathered enough evidence about Sybil and Caleb's past, and Mansfield had upgraded the surveillance system in the house so that he wouldn't miss a single detail during the upcoming dinner. Everything was ready for the final act of this drama, an act that would not only protect Alfred and me, but also stop Sybil and Caleb once and for all from finding new victims. The evening before dinner, I sat in my office going over all the evidence I had gathered, once again checking every detail of the plan. The pictures of Sybil with Caleb at the motel, the security footage showing her breaking into my office at night and stealing money, the information about her past victims and suspicious deaths, all of it was going to be irrefutable proof of her true nature. I thought of Alfred, of how he would react to the truth. It would be a blow, no doubt, perhaps the hardest blow of his life, but better the bitter truth than a sweet lie, especially when that lie could cost him his life. I was ready. Tomorrow Sybil would realize that her game was up, that she'd gotten away with nothing, that she'd chosen the wrong victim this time. The day of the family dinner came exactly 3 days after the theft. I woke up early, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. Tonight it would be over. The mask would be torn off, the truth would be revealed, and Sybil would no longer be able to pretend to be a loving wife and caring daughter-in-law. Alfred and Sybil had already moved into the west wing of the house 2 days ago, and now I could hear their presence all the time. The footsteps in the hallway, the muffled voices, the sounds of furniture being moved. I spent the morning double-checking all the details, called Hubert and Lucius, making sure they'd be on time and ready for their roles. Mansfield had already arrived early in the morning, ostensibly to help set up the dining room, but actually to set up the projector and screen for the presentation of evidence. "Everything's ready," he said quietly, finishing the job. "The files are uploaded and waiting to be downloaded. Just press this button on the remote and the show will begin." I nodded, clutching in my hand the small remote control that would start the unveiling process. Such a small thing, and such big consequences. Toward evening, I began to feel nervous. Not because of fear of Sybil, that stage I was past. I was worried about Alfred. How would he take the truth? Would he be able to cope with such a blow? Would he turn his back on me, blaming me for ruining his marriage? But it was too late to back down. Too much was at stake, not just my money or even my life, but Alfred's safety. If I was right about Sybil's plan, then after my accidental death, Alfred would be the next victim. I couldn't let that happen, no matter how painful the truth might be. The first to arrive was Hubert, precise as always. He looked serious and collected, like a man preparing for an important court hearing. Sybil greeted him with feigned enthusiasm, but I noticed her tense when he introduced himself as my lawyer. "Lawyer?" she asked with a slight note of concern in her voice. "Ramsey had not mentioned that you were a lawyer." "Ramsey and I have known each other for nearly 50 years, Hubert replied with a polite smile. "I have represented him in various cases throughout that time." I saw something like alarm flicker in Sybil's eyes, but she quickly pulled herself together and returned to her role as hostess. Lucius arrived next. Unlike Hubert, he didn't look like a typical policeman. The years of private practice had smoothed out his once sharp features, and now he looked more like a retired professor. But there was something in his scrutinizing gaze and the way he surveyed the room that gave away his profession. "Lucius Vale," he introduced himself, shaking Sybil's hand. "Former police detective, now just an old friend of Ramsey's." At the word detective, Sybil flinched visibly. Her smile became strained, and her eyes had the expression of a hunted animal. She quickly apologized and left for the kitchen, ostensibly to check on the roast. Alfred, visibly nervous in the presence of my friends, tried to keep the conversation casual. He always felt uncomfortable in the company of my acquaintances, especially those associated with the legal world. Perhaps he was still getting over my disapproval of his choice of career over law. When everyone was gathered in the living room, Sybil suggested we start with an aperitif. She was pouring the wine, and I noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. My guests, especially Lucius, were watching her closely, and she could certainly sense the attention. To family, she toasted, raising her glass. To new beginnings and a happy future together. I smiled, raising my glass, and said, and here's the truth. It always comes out sooner or later. Our gazes met over our glasses, and for a moment the mask fell away. Lucius was asking her questions about her past, about her parents, about where she'd grown up. Seemingly innocent questions, but I could see her growing more and more nervous with each one, confused about the details of her fictional biography. How did you meet Alfred? Hubert asked, carefully blotting his lips with a napkin. At the travel agency where I worked, Sybil replied, glancing at her husband. Prenawand, Alfred was planning a trip to Italy to study the local cuisine. Interesting, Lucius tilted his head. And before that, you worked in real estate, she stammered slightly. In Pennsylvania. What kind of company, if it's no secret? Lucius kept pressing. I know people there, maybe some mutual acquaintances. It was a small firm. Sybil was beginning to lose her composure. Tauron, I doubt you've heard of it. Why do you ask? Just small talk, Lucius smiled. It's always interesting to learn more about people, especially those who become part of my friends' families. Alfred, noticing the tension, tried to change the subject. Dad said you worked together in court. You must have a lot of interesting stories. Oh yes, Lucius nodded, especially about crooks and con artists. It's amazing how often people aren't what they seem. Sybil turned pale and stood up abruptly. Excuse me, I need to check on the second course, she said, and almost ran out of the room. Alfred looked at her with concern, then looked at me and my friends. What's going on? He asked bluntly. Why are you questioning Sybil like this? I realized that the moment had come. There was no point in delaying the inevitable any longer. Son, I said gently, there's something you need to know about your wife, and it's better you find out now, from me, than later, when it may be too late. Alfred frowned, his face tense. What are you talking about, Dad? I pulled out the remote control and pressed a button. The projector on the dining room wall came to life, and the first image appeared. A surveillance tape showing Sybil sneaking down the hallway of my house in the middle of the night. That was 3 nights ago, I explained. Watch carefully. On the screen, Sybil made her way into my office, went straight to the safe, opened it, and started putting wads of money into a gym bag. Then she pulled out her cell phone and started talking. I turned on the sound and her voice, clear and cold, filled the room. I'm in. It's all gone through. Yes, the full amount. The old man sleeps like a dead man. No, Alfred suspects nothing. Thinks I'm at Jenny's. Of course he doesn't. He won't even realize what's happened until it's too late. And then, the most devastating part. Don't worry, darling. In a week, we'll move in here, and everything will be under control. And in a month, 2 at the most, we'll have the house and everything else. I know what I'm doing. This isn't my first elderly friend, remember? I watched Alfred's face, seeing shock, disbelief, and gradual realization take over. He turned pale, his hands clenched into fists. This is some kind of mistake, he whispered. It can't be. Sybil returned to the dining room at that moment, carrying a dish of roast. When she saw herself on the screen, she froze, and then dropped the dish, which shattered on the floor with a loud clang. What is this? She exclaimed, trying to keep her composure. What kind of ridiculous joke is this? No joke, Sybil, I said calmly. Or maybe I should call you Serena Wiener. That's your real name, isn't it? Her face contorted with rage and fear. I don't know what you're talking about. Alfred, don't listen to him. He's always hated me, always tried to come between us. But Alfred stared at the screen, where pictures now appeared of Sybil meeting Caleb at the motel, handing him a bag of money. Who is that man? He asked quietly, not looking at his wife. Who is he, Sybil? Nobody, just a friend. She tried to take his hand, but he yanked it away. Alfred, darling, it's not what it seems. Your father is manipulating you, don't you see? He's always done it. Then explain it to me. Alfred's voice trembled with barely contained emotion. Explain to me what you were doing in your father's study at night. What money did you steal? And what do you mean this isn't my first elderly friend? Sybil began to panic, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for a way out. It's all lies, she screamed. A fake. He set this whole thing up to ruin our marriage. He never accepted me. I'm afraid it's not a forgery, Mrs. Pembroke, Lucius interjected, his voice professionally cold. We have not only these records, but also information about your past. 3 previous marriages to wealthy men over 50. About how they all either went bankrupt or died under suspicious circumstances. About your name change after the death of your 3rd husband. I could see Sybil shrinking more and more with every word Lucius said, her facade crumbling before my eyes. And let's not forget about your friend, Lucius continued, Caleb Stillman, now known as Christopher Shepard, your accomplice in all of your previous enterprises. We've already contacted the police in the cities where you operated before. They're very interested in reopening investigations into those accidents. You can't prove anything, Sybil went on the offensive, her voice hard. It's all rumor and speculation, and this tape is illegal. You had no right to spy on me. I have every right to install security systems in my own home, I replied calmly. As for the evidence, there is more than enough to charge you with theft. And I'm sure that once the police start digging deeper, there will be more. Alfred sat motionless all this time, as if struck by thunder. At last he raised his eyes and looked directly at Sybil. Tell me the truth, he said with such pain in his voice that my heart sank. At least now at the end, tell me the truth. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a tool? A way to get to my father and his money? There was silence in the room. Even Sybil seemed touched by his genuine grief. For a moment her mask fell, and I saw her real face. Cold, calculating, ruthless. What does it matter now? She said at last. You were naive and gullible, a perfect target. But now the game is over, so... She didn't finish her sentence, suddenly rushing for the exit. Lucius tried to intercept her, but she was faster than one would expect from a woman in high heels. In a flash, she was out of the dining room and running for the front door. Let her go, I said, seeing that Lucius was about to chase after her. The police were on their way. She won't get far. We stayed in the dining room, me, Alfred, Hubert, Lucius, and Mansfield. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken pain. Alfred sat with his head down on his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. I wanted to go over and hug him, to tell him that everything would be all right, but I knew that any words now would sound hollow. Finally, Hubert broke the silence. I'll call the police, see when they'll be here, and I think Lucius, Mansfield, and I should leave you 2 alone. I nodded gratefully. My friends retreated quietly into the living room, leaving Alfred and I alone. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I didn't rush my son, giving him time to realize what had happened. At last he raised his head, and I saw that his eyes were red from holding back tears. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked quietly. Why did you wait until tonight? I tried, son, I answered honestly. Remember our conversation in the restaurant? But you didn't want to listen. You were, in love. And love often blinds you. Alfred grinned bitterly. Love. Was it love? Or just a desperate desire not to be alone after his mother's death? He shook his head. I'm such a fool. All these years, and she was just using me to get to you, to get to your money. You're not a fool, I said firmly. You're a trusting, open person. It's not a flaw, it's a virtue. It's just that sometimes it makes us vulnerable to the likes of Sybil. Hubert's voice came from the living room. He was on the phone with the police. Then the front door opened and voices were heard. The officers had arrived. Alfred straightened up as if preparing for a new ordeal. I'm going to have to testify, he said, to tell about our life, about her lies. Yes, I put my hand on his shoulder. But you're not alone. I'll be by your side every step of the way. He looked at me gratefully, and for the first time in years, I felt the wall of mistrust and resentment crumbling between us. Lucius entered the dining room. The police are here, he said. They want to talk to both of you, and then they'll start looking for Sybil. Although, he grinned slightly, I don't think she'll get far. My men are watching all the exits from the city. Alfred nodded and rose slowly. We received a report of a theft and possible conspiracy to commit fraud. Are you ready to testify? I'm more than ready, I replied. I have all the evidence you'll need. The detective nodded and pulled out a notebook. Then let's start at the beginning. Tell me when you first suspected that something was wrong with your sister-in-law. As I began my story, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alfred sitting next to me. His world was shattered, his heart broken by the betrayal of the woman he loved. But he was alive and safe, and in time I was sure he would be able to heal from this wound as all wounds are healed, with time, love, and support. And Sybil, well, criminal prosecution, trial, and probably jail time awaited her. For the first time in her life, she was facing the consequences of her actions. And looking at the serious faces of the police officers listening to my story, I knew that this time she would not escape justice. It was 2 weeks after Sybil's exposure, 2 weeks filled with police interrogations, meetings with lawyers, and awkward breakfasts as Alfred and I sat around the table, not knowing what to say to each other. My house, usually so quiet and peaceful, now seemed filled with the ghosts of unfulfilled hopes. Sybil was arrested the day after dinner. She had tried to leave town, but as Lucius had predicted, she hadn't gotten far. The police found her in a cheap motel on the outskirts of Fairfield, where she was waiting for her accomplice, Caleb Stillman. He too was apprehended when he showed up there a few hours later. At the time of her arrest, Sybil was found in possession of nearly $100,000 in cash, part of the money stolen from my safe. The rest, I tried to... He didn't... All those little inconsistencies in her stories, the sudden absences, the phone calls in private. I noticed, but I ignored them, because I wanted to believe. After that conversation, something changed between us. Not that we suddenly became close. Too many years of estrangement and unspoken resentment stood between us. But there was a new understanding, a tacit acknowledgement of shared pain and need for healing. A week later, Alfred announced that he was going to sell Autumn Garden and move to Portland, where he received an offer to become a partner in the new restaurant. I got an offer from Portland, he said one night at dinner. A chef I know is opening a new restaurant and wants me to join him as a partner. It's a great opportunity for a fresh start. Portland, I repeated, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Nothing, it's far away. Yes, Alfred nodded. That's why I said yes. I need distance, Dad. From this city, from memories. Everything. I understood him. I really did. But it didn't make it any easier to know that my only son would be thousands of miles away. Maybe forever. We were just beginning to rebuild our relationship. And here we were, separated again. I was wondering, have you ever thought about moving? Alfred added. Moving? Where to? It doesn't have to be Portland, he said, a little embarrassed. It's just, this house is so big for one person, and it holds so many memories, not just the good ones. Maybe a change of scenery would be good for you too. Start a new chapter? His words made me think. Really, why do I cling to this house so much? Is it tradition, memories, or just out of fear of change? I'd lived here all my life, seen this house pass from my father to me, hoped to pass it on to Alfred someday. But now that Alfred was leaving, what was the point? I'll think about it, I said. Honestly, and I did think about it. For the next few days, I walked through the rooms of my house as if seeing them for the first time, or conversely, for the last time. This house had witnessed my youth, my love for Esther, Alfred's birth and growing up, the long years of loneliness after my wife's death. It has seen happiness and sorrow, beginnings and endings. Could it be time for a new beginning? At my age, many would have considered such thoughts madness. You don't replant old trees, my father would have said. But I suddenly felt a strange excitement at the thought of change, of new possibilities, of a life yet to be lived. A week later, I had a realtor appraise the house, and that evening I told Alfred about my decision. I've decided to sell the house, I said. You're right, it's time to move on. Where will you go? He asked. I was thinking about Portland, I answered, watching his reaction. No, not too close to keep you from building a new life, but close enough to see you once in a while. If you don't mind, of course. Alfred looked surprised but not upset. I don't mind, he said after a pause. In fact, I think it might be a good. There was uncertainty in his voice, but hope too. He didn't promise sudden intimacy or a perfect relationship. We both realized there was still too much unspoken between us, too many old resentments. But maybe a new environment, a new context would help us build something different, something healthier. One day while sorting through an old dresser drawer, I found a picture I hadn't seen in years. Me, Esther, and little Alfred on the beach. We were all smiling, happy and carefree. I couldn't, and then I picked you up and went into the ocean with you, I continued, suddenly remembering. You screamed and cried at first, and then laughed as the waves crashed over us. Yes, Alfred nodded, his eyes clouded. I remember feeling safe in your arms, like you had control over the elements and you wouldn't let anything bad happen to me. I always wanted to protect you, I said quietly. Even when I did it wrong, even when it felt like I was trying to control your life, deep down I just wanted to keep you safe from pain and disappointment. I know, Dad, he answered just as quietly. I know now. The day we finally decided the fate of the house, we found buyers, a young family with 2 children. Alfred and I sat on the back porch, watching the setting sun. There was something symbolic about that moment. The end of one era, the beginning of a new one. No regrets? Alfred asked. Regret what? Selling the house. The decision to change things at your age. I wondered. Were there regrets? Sure, I regretted many things in my life. The missed opportunities, the words I didn't say to Esther while she was alive, the years spent working instead of spending time with my family. But about the decision to start a new life? No, I didn't regret that one. No, I don't regret it, I said. I think that even at 72, it's not too late to start something new. It's not too late to correct mistakes, to build new relationships, to see new places. I want to live my remaining years, to really live, not just exist among memories. Alfred looked at me with slight surprise, and I thought, respect. A new chapter then, he said. Yes, I nodded. A new chapter. I didn't know what the future would bring. Whether my relationship with Alfred would become truly intimate, whether we could overcome the years of estrangement and misunderstanding. But I was willing to try, ready to take a risk, to step out of my comfort zone, to leave behind not only my home, but also my habitual patterns of behavior, old resentments, outdated beliefs. The sun disappeared over the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink and purple. Another day had come to an end, but ahead was a new dawn, a new day, new opportunities, and I was ready for them.